If you are thinking about getting an English degree, stop right now because it may be the worst decision you will ever make. And my name is Ian, and I run this channel, Right Conscious, where I talk about the greatest authors and books of all time. And I also have 2 English degrees, but they have done nothing for me in terms of creating this channel, in terms of being a writer, and even becoming a high school English teacher, which I am right now. And so I don't want to necessarily at the start of this video talk about the merit of going to college or not going to college. I first want to, focus on the English degree. And I will outright say right now, there is no job out there outside of becoming a college professor in English that requires an English degree. And I might even blow some minds right now. So I am a high school teacher in Arizona. At my school and at schools all across Arizona, there are teachers who do not have any college degree. Yes, in some states throughout the US, you do not need a degree at all to teach in high school. And I know plenty of English teachers that have degrees in zoology or other random things and decided to become an English teacher, and all they had to do was pass an English test that anyone who can read can pass. And so right from the start, we need to throw out this idea that an English degree can get you any specialized job, because jobs that require a degree, let's say like a journalist or a librarian, a grant writer, a technical writer, those jobs look at merit and your ability first and foremost. So getting a degree for a job is a dumb idea, but let's talk about the other things. If you love to read and to write, and maybe you want to connect with other people who are into reading and writing, an English degree seems like a great place, right? And so now I want to get into the nuts and bolts of how much reading and writing you are going to have to do to either get a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in English. And the numbers I'm going to be providing are from the average program because I attended multiple programs and switched out of one before I got my degree and have talked to countless other people who have got English degrees. And so unless you are going to Princeton or some other hardcore program, these numbers will be very similar. And so to get an undergraduate degree in English, you are going to take around 15 courses in English to get that. And to get a master's degree in English, you will take anywhere from 8 to 12 classes. However, to get a bachelor's degree, many of those 15 courses, anywhere from 5 to 8 of them, are more introductory courses. For instance, I had to take a literary theory class, a class on writing about literature at a basic level, then survey courses on American literature and British literature, a grammar class. And by the time all of that was done, it equaled to 7 courses. But in none of those classes, or I should say, none of those classes required me to read a single book. I read plenty of essays and short stories and other little things, but that's a very common experience. But let's throw that out the window. Let's say you are going to take an English class, and in all of those classes, you are going to read 5 books in each one of those classes, which is an anomaly. Most of my English classes, we maybe read 3. I had some where we got to 5 or 6, but those were the more hardcore professors at the undergraduate level. And so 5 books times 15 is 75 books. And in terms of writing, if you write an MLA formatted paper that's 10 pages long, it averages to around 2,500 words if it's double spaced. And so I never wrote anything in my undergraduate career that was over 10 pages. And so in general, you can expect to write under 3,500 words total, or we could even round that up to 4,000 words total if it's a hardcore class. And so if we assume that every class is that hardcore, which they won't be, you will write around 60,000 words. And to continue these overestimations, if you have a teacher that really likes to lecture, and this almost never happened once again, they may lecture 20 hours per class over the course of the semester. And so 15 times 20 is 300. But most likely that number of time spent listening to a lecture is going to be under 200. And so these are the high estimates so that no one can dispute this. But in actuality, you will most likely write 40,000 words, listen to 175 hours of lectures, and maybe read 50 books to get your degree. probably more like 40 books. And so, for context, I have since I was 18 years old and I'm 31 right now, easily every single year read more than 100 books, written more than 100,000 words, and listened to easily 1,000 hours of lectures or audiobooks and stuff like that. And I'm sure you are doing something similar, maybe not the writing portion, and that's not very hard to get into. And so maybe you want to go to school, but I want to talk about something that happened to me. And so when I got to university, I got there late. I started my English program right out of high school, and then I dropped out and went on this grand adventure in the world, which I won't get into right now. And so then I came back to the game, I think at 24 years old, and I came back to university. But this was after some years where I had read over 200 books in a year and had dedicated myself to knowledge and growth and all of these things. And when I got to university, guess what happened? My growth slowed down because it is fun to sometimes be exposed to new works that you would never have read before on your trajectory. But then having to sit in lectures for all the books that you hate, having to read those books, having to drive to the campus, having to deal with all the students who maybe don't care about the work or are annoying Marxists or stuff like that, and then having to sit and write about those works takes up more energy than you could possibly imagine. So much so that my own independent work plummeted, and I got out of academia in 2019, and it wasn't until really last year that I finally became who I was before I got into it. And so if you need to pay people to keep you accountable and help you read 45 books a year and do some writing, then you are in big trouble. Let me just tell you right now. And you need to focus on personal development and time management, fixing habits and goal setting, because I have known countless people after they get out of their program who have these dreams of becoming a writer or all these different things, and they can't do it because they've used university and public education as a crutch their entire lives. The number one thing you should be focusing on if you are trying to be a writer is writing and putting time in doing that with no accountability system except yourself. Because eventually, all of that is going to wither away and it's just going to be you. If you are trying to be a deep thinker and a great reader of literature, then you are going to need to be able to hold yourself accountable and read over 100 books a year if you want to be really, really well read. And so now let's talk about the networking aspect of all of this, because maybe you guys have heard before on this channel, but I have a wife and she writes some fire poetry. I'll link her poetry down in the description below. And if you ask her, she learned none of those writing skills while getting her degree in English. And I didn't meet her in English class. I met her because I had the confidence from living a life to walk up to her on campus and start a conversation. No English degree required to meet women who are into books and knowledge and writing and creativity, the woman of your dreams or the man of your dreams. And FYI, there are plenty of writing groups and poetry readings and a ton of other stuff in your city that you can go meet people at. It's not hard. Go to a book festival. I was just at a book festival. I did a meetup and met some cool people, and I saw plenty of women there alone. There's also this crazy thing called social media. I have a friend who has published books and has a presence on social media, and he's single and he's kind of a player, one could say, and he has all the options in the world, and he isn't a superstar. He has maybe 5,000 followers on social media, but he meets women on there all the time who like his work or whatever. And so if you're thinking about finding someone for dating at university, it's not a good place either. And so what I used to say and why I went back was I was like, okay, I don't have access to people with PhDs from Ivy League universities right now. And if I go to university, I can have that instantly. I can talk to all these people. And I did meet a lot of really cool professors who really taught me a lot. But then I realized something. So I had an awesome professor named John Bowers, and he is an expert on Chaucer and Tolkien. He wrote an amazing book titled Tolkien's Lost Chaucer, where he explores all these documents he unearthed for the first time in Oxford, where Tolkien's like writing about Chaucer. Anyway, so I took multiple of his classes, one on Chaucer, one on Tolkien, and then I talked to him. But then this book came out, and I read the book, and guess what, you guys? This is going to blow your mind. I learned more about Tolkien and Chaucer from his book than I did through sitting through 2 of his classes. And they were great, beautiful lectures. But all that information got condensed into this 130,000 word book. And he has lectures online and other books. And so if I just went and read those, which would take 15 hours to get through them all, I would have more knowledge than the 100 hours I dedicated to the reading, the writing, and all that other stuff. And it felt great to have professors with degrees tell me, hey, Ian, you have some potential and you should keep going and stuff like that. And that feels good. But what I didn't realize, and this is mind blowing, is that, okay, I have access to these professors. Right now on this channel, you guys, from what I've built, in 2 years, I have access, just in my contact list, to hundreds of professors. I have interviewed PhDs on this channel and professors, and because I've put myself out there, I now have access to thousands of professors. There are some professors out there who are super busy and aren't going to respond to you. But what I've learned is that there are more people that you can imagine who want to talk about their work and are willing to talk to you. I first realized this when I was doing some research for one of my college papers. And there was some thesis that I really wanted to read, but it was locked and I couldn't get access to it no matter what. I tried the interlibrary loan system, couldn't get access. So I just emailed the professor and I was like, hey, I'm really interested in your work, blah, yada, yada, yada. I really need this for my paper. This dude emails me back within 30 minutes and he says, there's a PDF with the thesis. And he says, who are you? I've been a professor for 20 years and no one has ever asked me about my thesis. And he was so excited. And then we later met up on a video call and he helped me out with my paper and all this stuff. And he was a random professor at some private university in Kentucky. And this dude had never had anyone in his entire life give him any attention. Maybe some kids came to his office hours, but this guy, his entire career, had been basically ignored by the entire world. And you would be surprised that that is the case for just about 99% of professors. If you're trying to talk to Noam Chomsky, then good luck. But, I've reached out to countless people for this channel, for research purposes, for interviews, and a bunch of other stuff. And they have been all willing to talk because they've dedicated their life to this and nobody wants to discuss it with them. None of their friends, they have these other professor friends, but they don't care. They're interested in what they're interested in. They have all these students and they're interested in what they're interested in. And then all their friends in real life don't care. And there's countless other people like you who think that they don't want to talk about it, but most of them actually want to talk about it. There are hundreds of Tolkienians and Gerardians and McCarthyans or whoever out there who would love to answer your questions. And so in terms of networking, it's kind of BS because I went to university and I made sure to go to the office hours of all my professors and talk to them. But in retrospect, I was talking about some bullshit. I like Virginia Woolf, you guys, but I had a professor who was a specialist in Virginia Woolf, and I went and talked to her and read all this Virginia Woolf, and I really don't give a shit, you guys. It's, I guess, cool now that I have a channel that I can just riff on her, but I didn't care about her then, and I don't care about her now. She's not my favorite, even though I respect her and her merit, and maybe I'll talk about her on this channel at some point. I talked to other professors about way more esoteric people than Virginia Woolf that really was not worth the effort even getting into, and I will never be able to discuss on this channel. And so in terms of networking, it's really not worth it because there are so many instances where I've known people who have gone to a program for one specific professor and they end up not liking them, or that professor is not there very much, that they don't have very much access to them, or that professor outright leaves. That's what happened to David Foster Wallace. He went to the University of Arizona for a certain writing professor, and then they left. And then he was stuck with all these people who drove him into addiction. He had no support. And he was like, dude, he was at a school that was focusing on minimalism, and he was a maximalist. And I haven't even mentioned the type of people who are in academia and have gone through that, and the quality of students. And so this may be mind-blowing, but I know countless students who got their English degrees and never read one of the books. I would say over half of my classes, if not closer to 75%, were not reading the books and would just look it up and BS their essays. They all knew that if you mentioned Derrida or Foucault, that you would get an A or at least a B. I talked to hundreds of students during my programs, during my degree seeking journey. And I only met, other than my wife, but in actual English classes, one person who I resonated with. One. And that friendship is worth infinity and gold. And thank God that I have that. But now from this channel, you guys, I could snap my fingers and say, I want friends who are into books. I have thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who would be my friend. And even if I only had 500 subscribers, I would still have 50 people who wanted to be my friend and talk about writing. I just had a meetup in Tucson. I'm going to do a Right Conscious World Tour soon. And there are going to be a bunch of people who are going to show up and want to hang out and talk about books. And the other thing is that the university system is very, very liberal. And I am generally apolitical and don't believe actually in politics at all. And so when I showed up at university, I was shocked. Every single one of my professors at the 3 universities that I went to, every single one, especially in my English classes, were not just left-leaning, but were outright liberal, if not socialist. And even if you are on the left or liberal, you should want people on the other side of the aisle. Actually, I should not say that. I had one professor, named Lee Barnes, and that's him over there with the bazooka. He was in Vietnam, and yes, he was a Republican. And lo and behold, I learned a lot in that class. We read Cormac McCarthy, Hemingway, and all these other people, and he was a gritty guy, and there was no sensitivity in there. And in the writing course I took from him, he would slam people, man. Like it was hardcore. There was no nice, inclusive stuff going on. But the student body was very similar. And that's just the case at university in general, that people are younger and more radical. But I remember once telling some guy and having what I thought was a civil conversation. I was talking about like anarchism and like all this other stuff. And I was talking about like anarcho-socialism or something crazy. And then I was like, screw the system and all this stuff. And then later he was telling everyone that I was some fascist, that I am a crazy Republican nut. And at some level, I do appreciate it, because during that time, I got into postmodernism, and I had people help me read Derrida and Foucault and Paul de Man. I had all these people who I could just go ask questions to, and they would help me. But nonetheless, it is very imbalanced. And so if we want to talk about graduate school, in graduate school, you read more books. But like I said, you really only take around 10 classes. And so even if you read 8 books per class, that's only another 80 books. And there is some more high-level writing going on. And now with ChatGPT and AI, in terms of especially nonfiction writing, which is much more objective, like academic writing is more objective than like fiction writing in terms of like quality. You could ask ChatGPT, what's wrong with this? And I bet you it will give you better feedback, especially if you keep pushing it and say, don't be nice, like break this down, than 99% of professors out there. And so many English degrees cost at least $10,000 if you're paying in-state tuition. And if you're paying out-of-state tuition, tens of thousands of dollars. Then when you get into graduate school and stuff, that number keeps going higher and higher. And so I would ask you guys right now, why waste your time? I'm always like looking at my paycheck, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, and the effort I put in, which I would say is pretty significant in terms of the dedication I have toward my students. And I'm like, if I got a different degree with the amount of work I put into this, I could be making $30,000 or $40,000 a year somewhere else. And I don't want to sit here and say that it's not nice to make an impact on kids' lives, but I've already made more of an impact with this channel in 2 years than I would have 10 times over as a teacher. If I was able to teach high school for 300 years, I would impact less people and change less lives than what I've already done in 2 years. And I'm going to continue doing this for 6 more decades. The same is true as if I pursued just pure writing. I would have impacted more people already. And so if you need to get a degree, then go get a different degree. Go get something that will be useful. Go take a couple English classes for your electives, because those are the ones that matter. Like I said, many of the English classes I took were survey classes and absolutely terrible. And so a luxury that you have as a student is that if you're attaining a degree, you can meet the professor. You can go to their office hours. This is what I would do. If I wanted to take a course, I would just go talk to the person and see what they were like, so I could see what the course was going to be like. But you can do the same thing with stuff outside of your degree and go talk to the English professors and see who you want to take. And you can still basically get what you would get from an English degree with your elective hours, but then get a degree in something useful like engineering or computer science or whatever else. And maybe you don't want to go to college at all. You know, what I noticed was that 90% of the kids in my class were getting an English degree because that was their favorite class in high school, and they just wanted their parents off their back. They wanted their parents to pay for their college for a couple of years and just be able to get through and act like they were doing something. And it was sad. And that's not the environment that you want, and that's not what you need right now. I believe in you. I don't think that you should do this. If you are going to do it, that's fine. If you're in the middle of it, you might as well finish it. But don't keep doubling down. Don't go on to graduate school if you don't need to. And I told you guys I would talk about the state of becoming a professor, and it's getting more dim. I know someone who has a PhD from a prestigious university. He's published 2 books on the person that he covers, which were very good. I've had him on the channel before, actually. I've interviewed him. And because he has, one could say, not the traditional politics and outlook towards society, he's not able to get a job. He can maybe get a community college job making a little bit of money teaching English 101. But from what he's told me, and I've heard this from countless others, he's not able to get a full-time position because he's also a white male. And I just hate to say it, but now with diversity quotas and diversity entering diversity entering English program curriculums, depending on your gender and your race, you really may not get a job. For instance, if you are a white male and you aren't planning to attend Ivy League schools, then it may be very, very hard to get a full-time tenured English position, even if you are God tier at teaching and at publishing. And if you aren't super liberal, then that's even going to become even harder. And so it's a rough, and maybe you get lucky. Maybe you're the one. I'm not here to discourage you. I'm just maybe trying to save you some time. If you want to teach people, you can teach people on YouTube. If you want to write, just write. Writing without the constraints of academic essays is so much better. Like when I write about authors and I don't have to worry about all that, it's so much more fun. Nonfiction is great if you don't have to make it into an essay all the time and follow all those topic sentence and all this stuff, when you can use purple language and go on rants. When you actually are trying to entertain people and write not for some journal that no one reads, but to get people interested in what you are doing. And that's also one of the faults of the university system, that it doesn't teach you how to make people care. I had to learn how to make people care about my writing, about my videos, about how I talk about literature. It was something I didn't learn from my professors who just stood and were boring. And so there it is, everybody. That is why you should not get an English degree. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for the support. If you had a positive experience with your English degree or a negative one, I would like to hear it down below. If you are on the fence about this, let me hear your thoughts. Maybe some people will come in and support you and give you some advice. And I will see you guys very, very soon in the next video.